Coons, it is all happening in WA, and leading West Australian businessman Richard Goyer, of course, is a chair of the AFL as well. He's the latest Perth-based chief to quit his home state due to the delayed border reopening. So WA was meant to remove its hard border and join the rest of Australia on Saturday in allowing free travel of quarantine with only caps and testing in place for arrivals. That's been delayed because your mate, mad as a cut snake McGowan, has just put his foot down and said, look, I'm madder than ever. So I'm just going to keep these things in and really, really push this and see how long until the people absolutely crack. Well, Goyd is the latest to crack. There's some high-profile people as well who have basically said, look, enough's enough. On the weekend, Wesfarmers Managing Director Rob Scott and his executive team announced they could no longer sustain their eastern state expansion plans while also seeking WA travel exemptions with a 14-day quarantine over the coming year. So it's linked as well to the AFL, the WA teams. If you were a player for the West Coast Eagles or the Dockers, you'd be sitting there right now going, well, what does this season look like? According to Richard Goyder, it's not going to look too good.
I don't think there's going to be great appetite for players outside Western Australia to be quarantining. It's a significant issue for both West Coast and Fremantle because they need home games and they need their crowds and they want their fans, but it's also a big issue for the AFL.
See, as it stands, I mean, speak to the Perth Scorchers. It could be a season on the road for these teams if it keeps going like this.
Yeah, well, look, it worked out pretty well for the Perth Scorchers, didn't it? They won the title, so they did it really well. But we've seen what has happened in the past with Western Australian teams, in particular the West Coast Eagles, who were a flag fancy in 2020 and did not travel well, just hated being in the hub. And Freo, to a lesser extent, they didn't perform. Well, they had a different sort of list at that stage. So it would be extremely tough. And to go through that, and I've spoken to a few players who were in Melbourne and had to hub. I've spoken to a couple of coaches who said if it came down to that situation, they just wouldn't do it again. They've just flat out said, nah, we just can't go through that again. But, I mean, at the end of the day, what choice do the Western Australian teams have? We will see, and they're going, it looks like at this stage, there's a little bit to play out between now and the start of the season. But the way things are going in WA, and I'm not sure what the vaccination rate is, but I'm assuming that is the only reason why Mad as a Cut Snake is still locking down hard with the border restrictions. So until they get that vaccination rate up to where it needs to be, then WA is going to stay closed. And who knows what's going to happen with Mark McGowan. He's changed his mind on a number of occasions. I mean, Feb 5, everyone was looking forward to opening back up, families heading back over to WA, getting out of WA and getting back without quarantining, all that. And now it's been put on hold. So if it does come to the Western Australian teams, West Coast and Fremantle, having to travel and be in a hub, I just don't know how many players will put their hand up and actually say, yes, I'm willing to do that again. I mean, we could see a dozen players sit out and say, nah, I'm not putting myself through this, I'm not putting my family through this again. So, and players with young families and babies, I mean, it's a strain on them particularly. The single guys probably wouldn't mind too much getting over and getting away, but guys with young families and things like that and family in Perth, it makes it extremely tough given they've already gone through it and know how tough it is. It's you almost put a line through West Coast making the finals or winning flag if they have to go into a hub again, such was their performance last time.
It's funny, straight away you look at West Coast, don't you? I mean, I think of guys like Josh Kennedy. And where would he be sitting right now? I mean, Jack Darling, as it stands, we don't know what his future even looks like in the AFL. So, geez, it could be very, very unsettling for the Eagles in particular. And unbelievably as well, I think in terms of vaccination rates, right now they're sitting at about 103%, but McGowan wants to get it to 110%, which is crazy.
Yeah, everyone's got to have their 48th booster before they let anyone in there. So, I don't know. I don't know what he's doing. I don't. But there's you see, and this is probably a horrible take from me, but I see a lot of people on social media from Western Australia just completely content with how things sit at the moment and going to bat for Mark McGowan. So I think there's a number of people in Perth who were just happy to keep living their life as is and locking everyone out because there is no COVID there. So, but again, how long do you do it for? How long do you delay the inevitable? I mean, every other state did it, apart from Victoria, for a number of months. And whilst Victoria was really struggling, everyone was living a reasonably normal life. And then as soon as you open the borders up, it's inevitable that this is going to happen. So I don't know what your man's waiting for.
No, it's completely situational though, isn't it? Because, I mean, you're right. I'm sure there'll be a lot of people who live and only have everything in their world is completely linked to Perth. That's why they
don't care.
Often talk about people in Perth feeling like they're in a different country. But I know people that, one a situation where a couple who's from Perth living in Adelaide wants to get back to Perth to see family. They can't do that. And also a couple who the wife is from Adelaide and the bloke is actually from Queensland, and they want to get out and see family, but they can't, and because they can't get back in.
Yeah, it's a crazy situation. And I know of a couple of people who came over from WA to Melbourne just before Christmas and said, look, I'm going to spend a few weeks over here and then go back to Perth on Feb 5 when the borders open. And then he changed his mind, so now they're sort of stuck here. And if they go back home, they've got to quarantine for 14 days. So it's a nightmare situation.